Good afternoon and welcome to our event, Holding the Line or Shifting Course, GCC Responses 1 month into the war. I'm Courtney Freer. I'm an assistant professor at Emory University in Atlanta, and I am joined by three experts today who will provide us some clarity into what has happened and what is likely to happen in the Gulf states as the war continues. So we have with us Mohammed Baharoon, who's the Director General of the Dubai Public Policy Research Center, Khalid, who's the Executive Director of the Middle East Council on Global Affairs, and Mohammed Alrumaihi, who is a member of the Board of Directors at Gulf International Forum and a professor of sociology at Kuwait University. So how it's going to work is I'm going to pose 3 rounds of questions, one question to each of the panelists, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So if you have a question, you can drop it in the chat, and then we will get to that later on. But first, I would like to pose a question to Dr. Romehi. So many suggest that Iran's decision-making is driven more by the Islamic Republic's ideology than by strategic pragmatism. What could realistically incentivize Tehran to shift from ideologically charged decision-making towards more rational state-based behavior?
To me, it is very hard to imagine that they can shift from the religious, if you like, decision making to a modern political attitude. Because what they have written in their constitution is that they are an Islamic revolution and they want to create the Islamic State, and Tehran is the leader of the Islamic State. That's why they have been building these forces, as we can see 1 month so far. And that's why, because they have put their proxies in Lebanon and Syria before, and Iraq today, and Yemen, and some other hidden groups like what has been discovered in Kuwait, in Bahrain, and even in Doha. So this ideology is expansionist, and they think that God is driving them to that conclusion. Although there was some time and different, if you like, head of government, there was some sort of thinking rationally, like when Khatami time, but most of them has been sided out, and nobody can say anything unless the Murshid is approving. If you go and read the book by Abdullahian, who was ex-foreign minister, Subh al-Sham, he explained why they have gone to Syria. He said, we went to Syria to protect Zainab Tum. Zainab Tum has not been disturbed for 1,000 years so far. So this is their attitude. And in that book as well, Mr. Layyan, who was killed by an air accident, said that we have a group of discussing policies, but at the end of the day, the Murshid has to take the decision. So you can see how things are concentrated in the hand of the mullah, and that's what make this war very long, and how they are stubborn to go ahead, even if the Iran is destroyed.
Thank you for that. That's helpful background, certainly. Dr. Al-Jaber, so to what extent we've heard, I know we've all heard about negotiations happening. Are they happening? With whom are they happening? So to what extent can these ongoing negotiations realistically lead to an end to the war? And do you see Gulf states playing a meaningful role in shaping the outcome, or will the process primarily remain US-Iran driven?
Thank you so much for having us all from the Gulf, and it's really interesting to hear from our colleague. And I think all of us live in very critical time. for the first time in the history, actually. The all GCC country, from Emirates to Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudis, Qatar, and Oman, had been targeted in the same time. The number of missiles and drone almost exceeded 6,000. That's reached almost 80% from the that missiles and target been fired from Iran to the Gulf countries, comparing 20%, which has been fired to Israel, which is part of the war that been started like a month ago with the United States. The numerous reaction and shock, it's very strong actually. We do have history. The history didn't go one month, it's been there for 45 years. Since 1979, when the revolution, Iran revolution started, actually, we've been facing almost four wars, Iran, Iraq, and actually, which is ironic, the Hormuz now, it's comparing in that time, it's almost similar incident happening when the U.S. Involved in that time and push hard for it until the crisis end. 1991, when Iraq invasion Kuwait, and we know how the casualties affect us all. To 2003, when invasion of Iraq until now. This is the fourth war that we facing in that region, and it's actually is the worst because now we are in like two perspective. Should we join the war? And this is like been pushing a lot, especially from conservative in U.S. side and some allies, or we should stay like impatient because we scared the future could be harder as remain the war remain and continue. And we've been studying in that history, and we saw how the proxies for almost 25 years, it's been growing from Lebanon, as Dr. Mohammed said, to Iraq, to Yemen, and hijacking not just the country, it's the whole narrative in Middle East and divide us. How do we look to the crisis? It's been going on in Middle East for almost 75 years. Specific, we're talking about, Israeli and Palestine and that part. So, regarding to your questions with the negotiation, yes, we following the news. The Pakistan now leading with Egypt and Turkey and Saudi Arabia. We heard some in news. They, I mean, try their hard to open at least small windows to get the two parties agree at least to reopen the Hormuz. We are waiting what's going to happen today with the speech with the president, but deep inside, we do feel this is like more complicated war. It's not easy because there's the trust. We don't see it in the both parties. With all bringing these troops and asking for a big military budget, almost 200 billions from the president, it seems like we're not gonna stop, and will the war gonna be continued in that part.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to turn to Dr. Baharoon with a somewhat similar question. So we're a month into the Iranian attacks, which the GCC have been managing, quite well for this amount of time. So there have been competing reports as to what will happen next. So are GCC states, in your opinion, still focused on containing the threat, or are we beginning to see signs maybe of a more proactive strategic shift?
Good afternoon, Courtney. Thank you very much for hosting us here. Uh, Frankly, what we've learned from this war is that there is limitation for power and limitation for diplomacy. Neither of them can achieve everything on their own. Now, are we going to see A huge advancement on diplomacy? Maybe. And the question is that it's not about war or peace. Both war and peace are just means. What is the aim? Is the aim of establishing a new type of security arrangement in the region to make sure that this war does not happen again? Or is the aim of diplomacy is to cut losses? And I think this is the fix we're in right now. There is huge lack of clarity on where this is going to, either if it's diplomacy or is it going to be, a military operation. This lack you know, of clarity has to do also with the principles underlying. So why did the war start? And based on whose assessment, who those who have been, subjected to it, has they opted for it or not? And again, how did the war change from threatening or trying to curb the Iranian nuclear program to curbing, world economic growth? Because frankly, that is what's happening right now. Repercussions of this war is being felt in Korea. It's being felt in Philippines. It's been felt in Slovenia. It's being felt in Egypt. So this is not a war between the U.S. and Iran anymore. And the control of the Strait of Hormuz is not going to be an outcome of the war. It's going to be a strategic shift on this whole concepts of freedom of navigation. And what we see today in Hormuz, we could see tomorrow in Malacca Strait, you could see it in other places, in Taiwan Strait and in other places. So this is now a different type of outcome out of the war. All of the discussions about the 15 points, valid, not valid, this is subject to discussion, but they're today not the main driver of the war. What is that, or for peace even? What is driving it is that what happens when the cost of war becomes unbearable for those who are waging it, and the cost of peace, also becomes extremely horrible.
Thank you for that. So it is remarkable how broadly the conflict has spiraled in just one month. So I'm going to turn to Dr. Alrumaihi. So when it comes to between containment versus continued escalation, what specific regional or international conditions do you think would be required to push Iran toward containment rather than renewed or continued confrontation? Oh, I believe you're muted.
It is very hard to answer this question. From the beginning, the Iranians have this kind of ambition to expand their power long time ago. But recently, at least within this 3 years ago, they have convinced Hamas to start their Al-Aqsa operation on the illusion that they will come to help them. They didn't. Of course, they asked Hezbollah to do some sort of maneuverment, and later on we know the end of the story. Hezbollah have stopped doing that, and later on the first armed engagement between Israel, United States, and one side, and the Iranian, when we have witnesses the 12 days war. Now, the expansion ideas is very obvious. I don't think that the Iranian have looked away from having the nuclear bomb. They are determined, and probably they have determined more after the 12 days war, and they will be determined more and more after the end of this war if the regime stay in power after that. The second point, probably the idea of expansion, first of all, is not to fight Israel, but to have a leverage on the GCC Gulf states, because this is where is the wealth is, and they think it is very thin populated, and they go usually to the history that they have occupied this area long time ago. So they are using whatever means they have, and you have the Zaydis in Yemen. The Zaydis is a branch of Shiitism. They are not 12th, but they are Shia. So that's why they have yani supported them by sending to them new armament. We know Yemen has no missiles, no factories, but the problem of Yemen lays on the support and finance and military support of Iran. Hezbollah, as you can see, they are overtaking Lebanon, and even recently, when the Lebanese government asked the ambassador, the Iranian ambassador, to leave on security ground, Tehran told them you have to stay, according to the against the international law. So what you have here is a regime trying to expand itself, trying to say that God have asked them to do that, and it looks to me in different way what's happened with Japan in the Second World War. The emperor of Japan at that time was almost God, and the fighters, the Japanese fighter were very fierce because they think they serve the God. It is the same sort of analogy you can draw with the Iranian today.
Thank you. That's helpful. So the ideology is really important here. I want to turn to Dr. Al-Jaber on a slightly different issue. So we've talked a little bit about some of the roles of Pakistan or China in potentially resolving the conflict. So what role do you think that multilateralism or external partners, particularly China or Europe, could play in de-escalating the conflict or supporting Gulf security? Or do you think they're not willing or able to move beyond largely diplomatic and economic aid?
Yeah, I agree. I think most of them, they're not willing. Look, everyone is suffering because the state of Hormuz is the heart of the world, and almost 20% oil, 20% gas, I think 75%, if I'm not mistaken, from other material. It all come from Gulf state, go through the Strait of Hormuz, goes to China, goes to Korea, to Japan, to whole Europe when it comes to the gas. Now we live in force majeure, what joined like four countries. Started with Qatar, then Kuwait, Bahrain, and now Iraq also become part of that equation. So everyone is suffering, but it seems like none of them want to take a real action. They come with a statement with the 22 countries condemning attacking of Iran to the Gulf state, or they ask for reopen the state of Hormuz, but nothing happened after that. You know what the worst case scenario? It's a day after when everyone, the three parties in specific here, declare victory. The president said, "Okay, this is the end of it. We're leaving. But, we achieve all of our targeting. Israeli said something, and also even Iran declared victory since the regime is still there. And we live in this dilemma for a long time, and we're suffering even from the outcome from political economy. And I think since I don't have a specific number, but I think it's almost $2 billion has been spending in that conflict every day. New York Times came with number also yesterday. I was looking at it. They said if Iran control the Strait of Hormuz, I think they're charging 2 million for one ship. So calculated for 1 year is going to be $100 billion. So it seems there's a lot of complicated situation we've been going on now, and it's been escalated. So since that said, I know the Gulf tried to push hard for mediation. They push hard for diplomacy. We saw Amir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim, went to Saudi Arabia and he met the Crown Prince, Amir Mohammed bin Salman, and he went to United Arab Emirates and he met Mohammed bin Zayed, the president of UAE. And it's more coming with coordination and try to push for solution. And they ask, like the diplomacy should play the big role. But it seems we all looking what's going to happen from the state side. And this war did not be our decision from beginning. It's imposed on us. We're paying a lot of price for it, and we don't know how this is going to end really. And that's a big question everyone asking. And scared is what's going to happen in day after that.
Thank you for that. So I want to turn to Dr. Baharoon into the Gulf specifically. So what additional collective defense measures do you think the UAE and the GCC states more broadly realistically could or will pursue, particularly something to strengthen integrated air and missile defense and to enhance maritime security in light of what's happened recently?
I mean, quite obviously, there will have to be a lot of reassessments of how we've done things. I think we've done very well, and there are elements that will need to be improved. But I don't think this is the big question that we need to face. And there is the concept of security, and there are three misnomers that I think we're detecting. First misnomer is this idea of regional security architecture. There is nothing regional about our region. There will have to be an international aspect because whatever happens in our region have impact everywhere. So there is nothing regional about it. Second thing is that this idea of collective security is that this is a collective security, even this idea of collective security between the US and the GCC countries. It hasn't really turned out to be collective because the decisions on security has been taken not collectively. We did not opt for this war, for instance. We tried to prevent it. But the assessment happened from the US, and that was, and to a greater extent, from also Israel. And that was the type of assessment that led to the war rather than the collective. The other thing is that this idea of security umbrella should prevent you from getting wet. Well, we found out that the security umbrella was more like a third-part liability insurance. When it happens, then we can come in and help, but it doesn't prevent it, which means this would mean we have to also think about deterrence, not only about a security measure to prevent the attack rather than to deal with it when it happens. But most importantly is that all of these spending that we will have to do on defense has an assumption that this war will continue to happen and it will go on for almost a very long time, if we don't say ever. So how can we change the dynamics that led to this war? It's quite, again, ironic that usually diplomacy kicks in after war to end it. This one, the war happened after diplomacy, as if diplomacy led to the war rather than the other way around. And I think this is where we've seen new diplomatic players coming up. I mean, Pakistan is a negotiator, mainly because the GCC countries who have been negotiating and mediating a number of conflicts are now at the receiving end. And it's extremely difficult to maintain that. The other one is that diplomacy at this point doesn't seem to be what Iran wants, because I don't think Iran today wants the war to stop. It wants to end it in a certain way that would cement its control over the region. And I don't think this is what we're looking at. So if we want to see what type of expenditure, defense expenditure we need in the future, then we're possibly going to deal with an old continuing problem and in the old means that did not lead us to where we want. I think we need to change those dynamics.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to turn now to Dr. Alrumaihi. So we've talked a little bit about Iran's proxies and their role geopolitically. So in terms of they've been critical to Iran's regional power. And so how vulnerable do you think the model is of the use of proxies? How vulnerable do you think it is now during the war and will be after the war? And could weakening these networks meaningfully alter Iran's broader regional strategy?
Some of us was thinking of Iran aggression long time ago, even during the Shah time. Personally, I have a book published in 1975. The title of that book was Oil and Social Change in the Gulf Region. And at that time, I have suggested that instead of sending oil and bringing goods to the Gulf area from Hormuz, we should have pipelines directly to the Arab Sea, and probably trains, fast trains between those Gulf countries towards the Gulf, to the Arab Sea as well. So the idea of closing Hormuz was there on the imagination of us for a long time. This is one. Second, the proxies depends on the armament and financial assistance from Tehran. And this is, of course, make the population of Tehran very negative toward these policies, because as we know now that a good percentage of the Iranian is under the poverty line, and a good percentage of them is against these policies. The opposition for the Iran regime is widespread in Europe and other places. The idea of the Iranian regime fighting Israel is a fake, generally speaking, because Israel take around 60% of its oil from the Azerbaijan and the northern Iran, and there is a pipeline going to Turkey and then to Israel. Furthermore, they say that they are bombing the military base in the Gulf area, but the largest military base is not far away from Tehran. It is Incirlik in Turkey. Nobody have seen any missiles sent there. As Khalid al-Jaber was saying, that almost 80% of the missiles and the drones have been sent to the Gulf state. That give you this idea that if they pressurize the Gulf state, the European and the American will come to help. But this theory is not necessarily right. The hidden agenda for the Iranian regime today is to take over the Gulf state. That's why they are asking officially that those Gulf states get rid of the military bases in the area, so they can easily then send their proxies. The proxies, they are in Iraq, in Yemen, in Lebanon, and in other places. Probably some of them are, and some of them trying to make problems within the country itself, like Bahrain, Kuwait, and other places.
Thank you. Yeah, we've certainly seen news of recent arrests in the Gulf states in the past few days, even today. I wanted to turn to Dr. Jaber. So, looking ahead, what form of GCC-Iran relations do you think are likely to take place after the war? Are we heading towards renewed deterrence and mistrust, or a cautious return to managed engagement and de-escalation?
It's a big question, actually. It's been asking now for since the war started. Where are we going from there? I think um, it's been. I think Gulf are broken from inside for almost like 40 years. They tried to build a decent relationship. Let's put it in that part. Oman and Qatar, and Emirat, United Arab Emirates, they do have a good relationship with that. Maybe it's become like more different perspective come to Saudis or with Kuwait. But I think we all get some deals that we don't want to be escalated. We want to build a peace and stability in this region. And almost for the past 10 years, we work hard to reach that deal because every one of the Gulf countries, they have like a vision for 2023 or 2024. So they believe in a big value and they want to contain it when it comes to politics and economy and building their country. And we are really heartbroken when we see all of these hassles for the whole month. Gulf been targeted for all that brutal way, and sometimes we're amazed why this is really happening in that scale. But on the other hand, the defense and system that the GCC built for almost like 40, also 40 to 50 years, it's really affected now. 98% has been intercepted from missiles and drone from Emirat to Saudi to Qatar to Bahrain to Kuwait. But even with that, with all propaganda that Iran came with to targeting military targeting, it didn't work because we saw a lot of these missiles and drones targeting just airports and energies facilities and this is the worst part with that propaganda is it didn't work at all. Also, when we now also a big question that we're all talking about it is where are we going to go from there? How can we rethink about building our defense and security in the Gulf? Should we continue the way that we used to do, just getting one ally, which is United States, or we should go with variety now, making more alignment with NATO, for example, or building more like partnership with the Turkey or Pakistan or even India as a big city, as a big country. Uh, but the way that I see it, the defense and security after this war has become very strong. I think every penny has been spent in that part. We saw it. We saw how these intercept muscles that and the whole system has been built and training in the whole GCC countries. We saw what how was affected in that war. So the future with Iran is determined from that angle, and we'll see who's going to come to the power now. We see like Iran, it's a body without head. We don't know who's going to come next. Are they going to continue the same policy they've been followed for all of these years, even with a new Murshid Mushtaba Khamenei, or maybe there's some pragmatic appear in that direction. I think all of that it will be clear after this war end, and we'll see how this is going to go from there.
Thank you. Last question from me, and then we'll turn to audience questions. Dr. Baharoon, are we witnessing a shift, do you think, in how GCC states perceive the Iranian threat, bringing them closer together, or do you think that current responses are consistent with longstanding assumptions about Iran's strategy?
Well, I don't think the GCC will have to come together only in cases of strength, of threat. So the fact that Iran has turned into a major threat doesn't mean that, okay, we only know each other, we only cooperate in case of emergency. I don't think that is the case. However, will Iran continue to be a state of emergency? That is a possibility. I mean, if the Iranian discourse on controlling the Strait of Hormuz, well, control will have to be by power. That means we're going to see a protracted conflict in the Strait of Hormuz with a lot of impact on the world, not on the region. That is going to be a determined element. But if we want to see if Iran is ever going to be friend, we'll have to look back the last 5 years. The last 5 years, our approach to Iran has shifted. And it started to be very obvious during 2020 with COVID. And then after that, we've started a whole process of opening up, building bridges rather than walls, instead of separating Iran, engaging with it. And frankly, we have built a lot of bridges. Now, during this war, Iran has built far more bridges than we can build. And going back to be able to build those bridges is going to be difficult. I think from the point of view of the GCC as collectively, at least in the next 5 years, there will be a lot of investment in not only in defense capabilities, but also in deterrence capabilities. How is this going to be delivered? What type of partnerships we are going to create? There is going to be a lot of discussions about it. Now, after those 5 years, and on the idea that Iran can start to find out that all of the bridges that it has burnt with the GCC has actually turned it into an island, that in times of peace, all of this capability for forward defense, as they describe it, is not going to be helpful. They will have to say, we will need connectivity with the Gulf, because that connectivity is going to help us govern the country that we control. And it is then when they will figure out that they will need to build those bridges, because a lot of the threats are not only military and security threats. And I think and after that, in possibly 15 years, a new generation of leaders might start emerging. And those are the ones that we could build a new relationship with.
Thank you so much. I have several questions from the audience, so I'm going to pose a couple of them together because I think they're similar, and we've touched on them a bit. But the first is about whether the war has fundamentally altered the regional balance of power. So are we likely to see a return to status quo ante after hostilities have ceased, or will things fundamentally changed in the region? And I think relatedly, about GCC defense responses in particular, do you see them as early foundations of a more permanent, institutionalized regional security architecture? So kind of questions about kind of broad scale, how the conflict will shape the region, and then more specifically on defense strategies in the Gulf. So who would like to start? Yes, Dr. Alrumaihi.
I think we should adopt this idea that the Gulfi, together we stand, divided we are vulnerable. So we have to go immediately after this war to a collective, if you like, armament strategy. uh, based on cooperation and financed by everybody according to their means. The second, to train our people for modern warfare, especially AI and the new technology. This is what we needed. We have to produce a defensive weapon as much as we can to defend ourselves because if you like, what's happened in Ukraine, Ukraine is that the West thought, even the United States, that Ukraine will fall in 10 days or 2 weeks. But because they have fighted, I mean, the people of Ukraine fighted bravely, other people come to help them. We have to take a lesson from that. We have to start ourselves and then ask friends to come to help. Still, we have the energy, we have oil, and we have gas, and other countries need that. If you can look to the map today, you will see that the most vulnerable state is not the United States or even not European, but India, Philippines, China, and those countries which have nothing to do with the fight. So we have to build a coalition, and I think what we have heard from Mr. Steimer, the British Prime Minister today, that they are having a conference of 30 old countries to address Hormuz strains. That's a good idea, and I hope they will take it to the Security Council, and then take a decision from there, because this is an international waterway and it has to be open to everybody. Basically, we have to think again of our security. We have to iron out the small differences between our own countries, and then go ahead to appreciate the threat of this kind of regime or any other problem coming along. And as you can see, the Kuwaitis is not suffering from the drones and missiles of the Iranian. They are suffering as well from drones and missiles coming from Iraq. And this is another problem. We have to address it.
Absolutely. Do the other speakers want to weigh in on that question?
I could comment on the idea of the security architecture. And I think any security architecture will have to be based on an imagination of the future. It is not based on how many, defensive weapons we have, or how many ballistic missiles we own, or how many airplanes, because that is going to keep us locked where we are. So for us not to change, for our DNA not to change, we shouldn't become Iran, because that's what Iran did. It has spent all of its money on developing, offensive weapons. And if we do the same, we will turn into another Iran. Our value today is for us being, the heart of the global economy, pumping energy across the world. And I think we will need to maintain this by developing our relationship with the rest of the world. And I think this is an important. If Iran wants to share that imagination of a future where everyone is part, and I think it will have also to understand that this is not a place where Iran and the people that Iran likes exist. It's a place that the people that Iran likes and the people that Iran do not like exist. And by that I mean Israel. So we cannot, ignore that the overall instability in the region has always been like an arc extending between Tel Aviv and Tehran. And for any viable security architecture, these two will have to be, part of that security architecture, part of securing themselves, but also securing the other, because there is no security for one that does not take in consideration the security for the rest.
Absolutely. Dr. Jalber, did you want to weigh in?
Just a quick adding for some points that's been raised. It seems like we live like in really fragile world, and even when it comes to the international community, it's become so weak. Now, Iran, for example, controlling the Strait of Hormuz. If the Houthi decided to control Bab al-Mandeb, and we see all of these countries from Europe, even with opponent China, Russia, big countries in the region, they just watching. They seem they doing nothing. They hopeless. Seem diplomacy is not working. Even we are in the war now for almost a month. It seems like we are not going forward. We cannot even distinguish between war between some countries with specific goals and with shut down like internationals water way north or south. So it seems like what happened to us? Why we getting in that war? This is one. Second, look, I saw some questions talking about China and Russia and how they get benefit of that. Yes, I think Russia is getting benefit now selling the gas and oil and the high price. But I think from Moscow perspective, they cannot add to that conflict a lot. Neither China, and we saw the Chinese position would come in Venezuela as well. I don't think these countries going to fight for like other right or other countries in that region. They're just looking for their interest. And we saw what they have been done also in Security Council when it came when the Gulf went there with the state. They did not vote, and the Gulf came with a condemning the whole targeting came from Iran. So yes, it seems the world is changing. The world is like different that what we see it. How this is going to look in the future, we'll see how this is going to turn out after that war is ending.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought in Russia because I wanted to turn our attention a bit to Russia. So there are a couple of questions, as you say. One states Russia is likely the most benefiting from the war. Does Moscow see strategic advantage in prolonging the war, and to what extent could its support for Iran alter the trajectory of the conflict? And then a related question again about Russia. Is do you think that the GCC-Russia relations could change after the war, given Russia's ties with Iran? Who would like to start us off?
If Dr. Mehi doesn't go, I will go.
Dr. May, oh, you can go ahead, Dr. Baharoon.
Okay, I think what I've heard from the Russians at least is that they're benefiting from the US strategic miscalculation. In their view, the US should not have gone into this war, but now that they have gone into it, it's fantastic because now they can pressure, particularly when it comes to intelligence sharing with the Iranians. Because in their view, this is their way to pressure the US to stop intelligence sharing with Ukraine. So in their view, this is a miscalculation that they're going to benefit from up to the maximum when it comes to their differences with the US and also with Europe on Ukraine. But, Russia is also making a strategic miscalculation, looking just like Iran is at the GCC as a lever to, up the pressure and that is where it will lose a lot of the respect this region has got, not only for Russia, but its role in the energy world and maintaining energy prices and supply across the world. Again, this is the same thing we were looking at Iran with, is that we want Iran to be part of the suppliers of the world, not only for energy, but on various issues. And the strategic mistake is that they did not look at the GCC countries as countries with their own agency, their own sovereignty. All what they have seen is a way to pressure the US. And I think that is both a mistake by the Iranians first, but now also by the Russians.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to say anything about Russia? So I wanted to move on a little bit and talk, this is an audience question, but it's about the US role. So to what extent is the US seeking to involve or deliberately limit the role of GCC states in the war to preserve their own positioning in future negotiations with Iran? And I guess kind of relatedly, I guess kind of how do you see what do you think the GCC states see their role in moving forward in trying to de-escalate the conflict and working with the US in doing so?
I think this is a very important question. It's been a big debate now. You know, when the war started, we've not been consulting about it. We just know from the social media. I don't. I, we're not the only one. You know, the decision has been taken from five people. You know, the president and the four people with him. But now we're talking about the future. We're talking about negotiation, and we all believe in the Gulf that we not want to make the same mistake as happened in 2015 with the Obama administration, when the Gulf has been isolated completely and woke up in the day after and they found there's a deal that's been signed with Iran, and they get us to that point to see is nothing changed in that direction. Nothing changed when it came to nuclear programs or like building the missiles and also with the proxies. So the demand from the GCC today, any negotiation is going on from US side or from regional side, from the Iranian side, the GCC should be part of the table. Again, with the same thing, if you're not on the table, you're going to be part of the menu. So we don't want to make that mistake for the next 5 to 10 years is coming. And I think Gulf should give their own condition. They should ask about reconciliation and should be guaranteed. And this targeting for their country is not given and it's not going to happen again.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Yes, Dr. Alrumaihi.
I think, yeah, to go back to the Russian position, I think they are benefiting from what's going on. They are selling their oil. They are betting on a divided Atlantic. That means American is angry with European, and the European, their priority is Ukraine. And more than that, they would like to advance their position in Ukraine. That's why extension of the war is beneficial to the Russians, as can I see can as far as can I judge. The second thought I have, if I may, is that we have to look to the next day in Iran itself. I think the regime, this existing Iranian regime, is almost the same regime under Shah. The Shah has spent his money on luxury goods and on security. Those people are spending their money on security and funding other proxies. So the two have ended to the same conclusion that the people of Iran is poor and underprivileged. That's why I am, I'm thinking that the Iranian people will rise again, this time in a very big way. Nowadays, we know from the Iranian opposition that they are starting to do that in certain places in Iran. Uh, Probably killing some security personnel and playing havoc with the internal security. Uh, this war have depreciated the power of the Iranian regime so far, money-wise, economic-wise, and even armament. But again, if you like to the number of arms they have in their position, you will understand how they were thinking for this day. They have thousands and thousands of drones and thousands of missiles. So this regime has anticipated long time ago that sometime he will face the fact that the world is not going to tolerate his way to the nuclear bomb.
Thank you. Dr. Baharoon, do you want to weigh in on that question?
And just very quickly, this relationship between the GCC and the US has always been based on this concept of a security umbrella. And unfortunately, we have figured out that this umbrella has a number of holes. Biggest hole we faced was during the attack on Doha. So what we're doing is that we're patching up those holes rather than throwing away the umbrella. My question is that if we keep on patching and patching and patching, how identifiable this umbrella is going to be as a US umbrella or not? And I think this is a question for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're running low on time. I want to end with one last question to all three of you, since you are sitting in the Gulf. So from the GCC perspective, what do you think is the biggest strategic miscalculation that could still occur in this conflict, and which actor is most at risk of making it? And if there's anything else you all want to add that you feel that we should hear, now is the time to do that. I'll start with Dr. Alrumaihi.
I think the miscalculation is entering with this regime a negotiation. It has time and time again, we find out that they go to negotiation just to buy time, not to do business. And that was the first time, and this is the second time. And unfortunately, the American administration is not clear what exactly happened in these negotiations. I do believe that there was a deadlock, and that's why they decided to start the war. I don't think the negotiation is right with this regime unless they have unleashed the weapon of trying to bring it by force to real negotiations. Now, after the killing of Khamenei and a good number of top leaders, probably we will find some people will go behind the regime to discuss, the next day, and hopefully that the Americans have some sort of connection with this second line, if you like, political leaders, and there is some moderates which work with the regime, but they have different attitude. To work with them to change the regime altogether, and to make Iran just an ordinary state living in peace with its neighbor and with the world.
Thank you. Who wants to go next? Dr. Jabbar?
I do agree with Dr. Mohammed, actually, what he said with negotiation and everyone looking for that part as well. Also, the big concern, let's say it in the nightmares, if this war has been escalated more and more, and maybe take us to the worst scenario as well. When if Iran is very divided when it goes to war and being hit very hard, and the GCC country find themselves involved with that war for decades. In the end, the troops is gonna leave, go back to US, and the GCC gonna deal with this problem for a long time, and this is gonna affect all of us, and we're gonna pay for very high price when it comes to the security and defense and the economy and the maybe targeting that will continue in Strait of Hormuz, or targeting the cities, or targeting even the oil and gas facilities, and make it hard for us for the next 10 to 20 years from now. So that scenario, I would like not to see it in that part. I hope that diplomacy peace can work, and we all get like seen again and try to find a solution to what we have.
Thank you, Dr. Baharoon.
I mean, I quickly would say that the biggest miscalculation was that power equals security. That was a miscalculation. The idea that by waging war, I can secure myself. And I think this is something that possibly Israel was starting with, but then the US has bought into it. The US position on the 12 days war is different. Using military power has been different from this one. The other problem is that if power, military, did not achieve what diplomacy was supposed to achieve. So is diplomacy now going to stop the war? And if diplomacy is about stopping the war, then this is not about the aim. It's not about what is the end. From Iran's point of view, I think Iran will have to decide whether it's part of a wider grid, if it is on the web with everyone else or not. If it's on the web, then it can benefit people and it could benefit from others. If it is not, then there is no point in being a state that is going to be recognized by others as someone that I want to cooperate. They cannot fight everyone else in the world. They cannot keep them. I mean, even if you're a scorpion, at the end of the day, you need to eat. So this power cannot be, an end game by itself. So, and that's a question the Iranians have to face.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our speakers. You've provided some much needed clarity in what is a shifting and evolving situation. And thank you also to our audience for joining us. And I wish all of you safety in the ongoing conflict. And hopefully we will meet again soon under more peaceful circumstances. But I will talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.